This is Art 157, Week 7, Lecture on Materials. I'm using Photoshop. You could also use GIMP if you'd like, and if you have any questions, let me know about that. This is a image that I acquired online. Actually, I included links, but if you go to www.blender3d.org, they make a free open source 3D software program, and they have links under their download section for all these different online repositories of textures, so something to check out. So the first thing we want to do is I just want to talk about some things. Most of you most likely are going to take pictures using your cell phone. The big thing that happens with your cell phone is it is not always the best lens. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's actually a bulge, and let me just push this a little further so you can see it. Usually what happens is your lens does that. Now that's pretty extreme, but depending on how the lens is grounded will make a difference. So what we want to do first is we want to get rid of that distortion before we do anything, so that's getting rid of the bulge. Next thing we want to do is there's also the vertical, which is when basically the map is forward or backwards. And let's set that to around -1. And the nice thing about this stuff is you can just kind of play with it to get it. And then horizontal perspective is basically a shift that way. And let's keep that roughly there. And then you also have angle. Let's do -1.5. And that should be pretty decent as far as getting it to line up. So just something to kind of see. The other thing to be aware of is when you take these photographs, the best time to do is when it's cloudy out and there's no shadows. I will show you a program that has an ability to remove shadows, but it's better just to find an image that's already made properly. Okay, so I'm done with that. And now I have my cleaned up image. And what I like to do, and if I already have the default, so I'll show you again, is you go View Rulers. And what you can do with the rulers, and also I like to lock my guides, is if you hold down left mouse button, you can drag off a guide, and then you can line it up wherever you want. So I want to kind of get some area where there's, you see there's these large bricks, and then we'll come over here, and we'll grab this large brick, and then we'll come down, and then with down, I'm going to put that over top. Actually, let's do the big bricks, and then this is going to have to be over top. Do guide, because I have them locked. And roughly, you want to get a square, and when you do the textures for Unreal, they have to be squares. If they're not squares, they won't even import. So just be aware of that. And I'm getting this roughly close to a square, but it's not going to be a square. I mean, I can already tell you that. You can see visually it's going to be off. But at any rate, it's a good object to start with. And at this point, let's just clear the guides. And we can pretty well work from here visually. So if I go in and just to mention, if we look at, there's two different ways we can make this a square. The one way is to go in image size, and usually when you open up the constraint, proportions is set. And the pixel dimensions need to be a power of 2, so let's just do 256. Now if I do this, you see it's adjusted, but if I turn off constraint proportions and I do 256 by 256 and hit OK, it basically distorts the texture. It's not major and you don't see it, but now I know it's a square. The other way that you can do it is you can also use canvas size, and what that'll do is once again switch it over to pixels, and in this case I would make it larger, but the thing with that is then you would have, like, let's say a black border on the top and the bottom. So you can either distort, or you can do something where you would have black borders on two sides of the image in order to make it a square. So you make it bigger, you make it smaller. In this instance we're making it smaller. So the filter that's handy for doing these types of textures is called offset. And let's do -128 to just be clean with our 256. And you can see right now at this point that we have some tiling that's off and an issue. It's not major, but it's enough optically that people are going to see it. And then this is where there are all these different tools you can use The one technique that's tried and true is using the rubber stamp. Every paint program has a rubber stamp tool, so it's one of those things that it's a technique that works. It's proven, and all you do, at least in Photoshop, is you hold down the Alt key, you click where you want to sample from, and then you hold down the left mouse button, and you do your sampling, and then you can use that to clean up. So, for instance, let's copy the grout right here. Actually, let's find a brick that has a better texture. Color, let's go down here. Okay, so and start up here. And go down, and then go over to the other side. Okay, that kind of worked. One here, clean this up. And you can see this kind of gets a little tedious over time. Basically what you're doing is you're coming in and you're cleaning up the seam the best you can and hiding it, and generally what you do is you just sample elements from elsewhere in the scene and use that as a way to, if you can get everything properly lined up, to actually clean up your image and make it look better, and like I said, to also hide the seams to some point, and just using basically the brush tool to do it, the rubber stamp. Likewise, I have other things. So let's just do this offset. So you kind of get the idea. You go in close, you do it, and there's other techniques that people use, but what I'll do now is I'm going to do the offset again, and this time we'll send the texture back to its original state. And I just do that just because, so I know what it looks like. Now at this point, assuming that we had cleaned up all the seams and everything, we can go in and we can basically do what's called define pattern, and it'll just automatically copy it into the memory. And then we want to do a new file, and I already have this set, but I'm doing it 224 by 224, so if it's 256 you're going to get a lot of tiling. When you do that, hit OK, and this new one we're going to go edit fill, and we're going to choose the pattern we just made, which is here, and hit OK, and it'll automatically fill the entire scene with that texture, which is a great way to see how you're mapping. Now if you look at this, the thing that sticks out most, even though the seam is off, is this big orange brick. So the nice thing is we can go back at this point, and there's the big orange brick. And another option that people like to do, and in some ways this is probably the easier, more elegant solution, is to find another brick somewhere. And let's just copy this one, do a Control Z and a Control B to copy it, grab the move tool and move the copy and bring it up and over and roughly get it positioned as a way to cover up that one brick. Once you do that, if you have everything you like, you would actually go in and you'd flatten the layers so you get rid of it, because actually we had two layers whenever you copy. And now I would just go in and define pattern again. It's going to put in the same name unless you change it. And then we'll go back to the original, and this time we'll do a fill, and we will choose the new pattern. And if you hit OK and you load it, now you see that's gone. So if I undo the fill, that's the old version, and if I redo the fill, there's the other version. So this isn't perfect, but you can see once you get lighting and those types of things, it's better. And if you do searches online, there's a lot of different seamless options. Now we have the tiling how we like it. We'll go in and actually save the file. So go up File, do a Save As, and just to let you know, there's a lot of different file formats. Unreal only supports a couple. It supports BMP, it supports PSD, which is your standard Photoshop file format, if I can find it, Photoshop. And then also the other options you have is you have a Targa, and the main ones that I usually use and recommend doing is you have the, there's the PSD, the BMP bitmap file format, and you use that for anything that just has RG and B channels, so basically something that doesn't have an alpha channel, which you use to define transparency. You can use a Targa, and you can use what's called the 24-bit Targa, which you could save it with. If you have an alpha channel, you want to save it at 32, and we'll actually look at that in a minute. So I'm just going to save this as a BMP, and I can do a couple things. Now that it's seamless, I could just leave it alone. The other thing to do is to make sure there's no spaces in the name, because you won't be able to import it. and Unreal if it has any spaces. So brick, let's see, what's the size? 250, oh, it's RGB, and it's 256 by 256, so I write that one. And then the only other thing I can do is I can write in diffuse or color so that I know that it's actually what channel it is. We'll just leave this alone because I'm going to show you some ways to do some other stuff right in a second. So hit save, and you can see there's still the same kind of options. Regardless, you're not going to be able to save transparency, so if you have it, do the target. And now that's saved, and we can minimize out Photoshop. And now I'd like to show you a program called Crazy Bump. I provide information for it. It's a great program. The person who designed it is practically a genius. And it's a really simple program. So what you do is you choose a photograph or an image, and we just created our texture. And we have the brick 256 BMP. Hit open. And the first thing, it's going to evaluate the image, and it's going to ask you, so what this is doing is there's no such thing as bump maps in gaming, but there's a thing called an image map, which is a normal map, which is similar. So this is basically evaluating the image and trying to figure out what parts are raised and what parts are lowered. So you can pick either one, and you can always go back, but this one, for the most part, the grout is coming forward, and this one, the grout's receding, so I'll select this shape. And it'll take the data, and voila, it creates this 3D map. I can go into options, and basically let's turn off that and that, so you can see the basics. And then once I start to do things like add diffuse, which is our color, now we get a really much more realistic. If I turn off the if I basically, so we're seeing the normal map as well. So this is a nice tool to have. And you can go in and do adjustments. You can do some of this in Photoshop, but it's pretty hard. You can go back to your original image and you can adjust it. There's also an option for moving shadows, which works incredibly well. Specularity is how shiny everything is. Ambient occlusion is self-shadowing, so it basically calculates light source and says, okay, here are the consistent shadows. That always helps realism. And then displacement is when you're actually moving the geometry, and potentially with the next gen systems, that might be a much more beneficial tool to use over the normal map. So when we're done with it, and I'm not going to do any more adjustments, but you can, I'm going to do save all textures, and what it'll do is it'll default to a PNG. You can also use that. The compression on that basically removes information that's web-based, like the JPEG. So I'm going to go back to the BMP, and I'll just leave brick RGB 256 again. Actually, no, let me just do this. Yeah, let's just do it again. It'll overwrite it, but that's okay. So, and you don't get any feedback or anything, but if you go in and we look, all of a sudden now we have color, displacement, normal, ambient occlusion, and specular. And we can bring this all in. So this is a really awesome tool for making realistic textures. So let's go into Unreal now that we have these textures and import them. So we're going to go in and grab Content Browser, and actually we're going to do most of the stuff in here, so I'll just maximize this. You want to go down and choose Import, and then I'm going to go up to the desktop to find my file, and I basically am going to hold down the Control key and select the color, the normal, and the specular. Now you can use the ambient occlusion, the others, to enhance. What people do sometimes is they combine the ambient occlusion and the color map. There's some different options you can do as well, but I'm just going to bring in these three. That's kind of the basic. If you want to build something, you can do other things. And then when I hit open, it's going to ask me, and now I'm going to create a package. So I'll just say material demo and grouping. That's usually materials as a default, and then this is my color. I'll just leave it as is, and if you're doing other things, there are options for creating material upon import and doing different things. I'm just going to do a OK, and then it loads up the normal, and then if I just do OK to all, it'll do the same thing for the three images. So now I have 3 images loaded, and you'll notice there's an asterisk, and there's an asterisk there, and this shows up on our new package, and that's because I haven't saved it yet.